Okay, so today we're going to go over order of operations. This is probably pretty straightforward for some, new to others. No matter what, you will be learning some tricks today. Tricks to put up your sleeves. So, order of operations. Can anybody tell me what it is? Yes.
It's the order that you perform different operations in an equation, like multiplication, division.
Perfect. Good explanation. Usually when I say, does anybody know what order of operations are? They say, it's the order of operations. I'm like, good, that's a good answer too. It's in the title. It's the order of operations. It is the famous, what was the one that was going around Facebook? And it said, like, answer this. And majority of people gets it wrong or whatever. I forgot what it is. But so let me actually put a 4. I think that's what it might have been. Well, actually, no. Let's just go back. 3. So, for some reason, people always think that you have to do the multiplication first. So they do 2 times 3 first, which comes out to be what? 6. Then they bring down the 4. 4 divided by 6 comes out to a decimal, right? Okay, where did I leave off? 4 divided by 6. What did it become? It could be a decimal or a fraction. 2 over 3, whatever the decimal is, but whatever. That's the answer if you multiply first. The thing is, the correct way to do this, my friends, this specific problem, is to do 4 divided by 2, which is 2. Then you bring down the 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 3 is 6. It's because there's a rule. There's an actual order that you need to follow when it comes down to operations. Operations being division, multiplication, any subtractions, or any additions or any subtractions. There is a rule to it. There's an order to it. So, this is the order. And then y'all are going to tell me what you remember, because everybody's different, especially from all different types of the world. We all learn it. I think I already heard it. What was it?
Is that PEMDAS?
Yeah, so PEMDAS is the one that we are going to go over. But now comes the question, do you know what was the acronym to help you remember? Or not the acronym. What was the famous saying to help you remember the order? So, majority of the times in elementary, they teach us, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That's a little phrase saying to help us remember. It goes PEMDAS. Watch out for this right here. I'm telling you all right here. I'm even going to do it in red to help you remember not to do this. Which is P. Is that even visible? Don't have that in your head. It going straight down. Because it's that right there that makes people think that multiplication always comes first. Which is not true. Or that adding always comes before subtraction. And that's not true. I'll get to that more later. So have this in your head. PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So that's just to help you remember the order in terms of the first letter. Please, excuse, right? But now, what do each of these actually mean, though? Yeah, so the P, my friend, stands for parentheses. It means do whatever is inside parentheses first. A student of mine a couple years back gave me a good way to remember it. Parentheses is like your arms are the parentheses, right? And then you point towards the inside and you say, do me first. Do me first. That's parentheses. It's the top of the list. You must do whatever's inside parentheses. Now watch out. Obviously it does mean do whatever's inside first, which means you would obviously do the operation of 2 plus 3 first. The thing is, watch out for parentheses that don't really have anything inside. Students all the time see this type of problem. They're like, oh, there's the parentheses. I got to do what's inside of it first. And then I tell them, all right, what is there to do inside? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, yeah, it's because these type of parentheses, all they are indicators, right? They're just showing you, hey, I'm a -4 inside. It's not really much to do there, right? Watch out for the other parentheses that might trip you up. See? Which is, oh yeah, let's just stick with that. -6 and 3. Again, there's nothing to do inside the parentheses, but that parentheses, because it's right snugged up against the 3, means multiplication, so you're doing -6 times 3. But again, there's going to be parentheses somewhere. Don't always think that there's actually, you have to go to that, right? Parentheses could also mean multiplication. It could also just be an indicator to show a negative that's inside of it. So parentheses are the ones that you got to, that has multiple meanings for it. But definitely, if there's stuff to do inside of parentheses, you have to go into it and you have to work it all out first inside before you do anything else. Which again, we'll look at lots and lots of examples. But right now we just got to go over what all of these are. So E, what does that stand for?
Equals.
I have an equals and I have an exponents. It is exponents. Exponents mean, my friends, it means your powers and your roots. So if you see those, you got to do those first. I mean, not first, second, next to parentheses, obviously. But definitely first before any of the next following rules. Like the M and D. What does the M and D stand for?
Multiply and divide.
Multiplication and division. Now, this was the rule that I just showed you over here. So there's a rule, and there's a reason why I put them together, and I want you all to remember to put them together, like in terms of in the same row, M and D, A and S. Because no multiplication will not always come before division. The rule tells us you do whichever one just happens to come first, from working from left to right. So again, in the example, I'll just do one here. I'll just do this one. In this specific case, the multiplication came first in terms of actually physically coming first. The division is the second operation that you have to do, right? So in this case, you will do the 2 times 4 to create 8. You bring down the rest, 8 divided by 4 being 2. Versus this one over here, which again, the division sign came first, which is why we did the 4 divided by 2 first. It's just literally working from left to right. You always spot which one comes first. That's the rule for the multiplication and division. And that rule is the same for adding and subtracting. Another question? But that same rule applies to the adding and subtracting as well. Back home, was there anything with adding and subtracting? Was adding always first or was subtracting?
The
Adding first, all right. So the same thing here, adding and subtracting. You just do whichever one happens to come first. So if we erase this and we look at it like this, we have to do the 4 minus 3 first, which ends up becoming 1. Drop down everything else. 1 plus 5 is 6. So that same rule applies. You just do whichever one happens to come first. We had to do the subtraction here first because it physically came first. Yes?
So if you did it the opposite way, you'd still come up with the same answer, right?
Oh, probably. There's a lot of
8 minus 4?
There's a lot of coincidences, but 4 plus 3, what is it? 7 minus 5? No, not the same. But don't be surprised if sometimes, if you check whether you did one the other way, that sometimes will come out the same. But that's just coincidence, right? Don't ever think, if you ever see that, don't ever say to yourself, oh, I guess I could have done it either way. Don't ever think that. That was just a coincidence moment. You don't ever want to fall for that trap. So remember this. But now we got to look at some examples, am I correct? So now comes the fun part. Applying this. Here we go. So, what's the number one rule for order of operations?
Parentheses.
Parentheses. All right, so you go in and you see this parentheses over here. All right, you're not wrong. There's physical parentheses there, but is there anything to do inside the parentheses? No. So there's nothing to do. You have to leave that alone. Don't immediately say, oh, but I do know this means multiplication, so let me just very quickly multiply that. No, follow the order of operations always, because you never know what might go wrong if you jump ahead. What I know for a fact is that in this parentheses right here, there's a little addition problem to do. So guess what? Do it. Because you have to do that first, because it's inside parentheses. 5 plus 3 is what?
8.
I'm going to try to fit all of this in this one screen. So, here's the trick with order of operations always, my friends. At this point, you don't need those parentheses, but because they're not really doing anything. There's not even a negative inside, so whatever. But I really do recommend making that a habit to bring down stuff if you can, including parentheses that don't even do anything. But I recommend doing that. It is a good habit to start right now before tomorrow's lesson. So here's the beauty. Here's the thing that's always going to help you with order of operations. Now, sure, if you had a calculator, you could probably put all this in and get the answer right away, which we're going to do a lot of tomorrow. But for those of you taking your GED, and for those of you taking other types of tests that might not allow calculators, but in particular the GED, the first 5 questions you are not allowed to use a calculator. So what type of questions might they give you? Well, the type of questions that we've already done the first week, and definitely order of operations. And they want to see whether you know how to do order of operations by hand. How will you always be safe doing order of operations by hand? By taking it step by step. Whenever you do make a change, just take an extra 5 seconds of your life and just rewrite it underneath your new problem. Show your work, pretty much, is what I'm trying to say. Because if you do get a weird, funky answer at the end, you can at least go back and see where it went wrong. You'd actually see all your steps through and through. So that's what I'm going to be showing you. I'm going to be showing that I just solved the 5 plus 3, and guess what? I rewrote the whole problem. but now with my new answer inside the parentheses. And that's what we're going to do. That's what you should do. So, nothing to do inside that parentheses, nothing to do inside this parentheses. So we move on down our list. P is done, parentheses. Move on down. Are there any exponents? What's the exponents that we see? 8 squared. Oh, y'all should be familiar with your perfect squares and your powers by now. What's 8 squared? 64. You should see that and automatically know it without even taking out a calculator. So, again, don't be lazy now. Rewrite all your stuff, always. So now I have that. Now let's look at this. We have a 64 over 4 plus 3 times negative 1. What should we do here? What do? We divide. If you recall, you no longer see this in algebra. You see this in algebra to represent division. So, here I am, 64 over 4. What does that become? So, I'll go over here. 16 plus 3 times negative 1. What do we do here? What's the next operation that we must do? Well, division is done. And I see 16 plus 3 or a 3 times negative 1. Which one do we do?
3 times negative 1.
3 times. Why? Because order of operation tells us that for sure 100% multiplication and division will always come before any adding or subtracting. That's a given. So we must do 3 times negative 1 to create what? Well, make it a habit. Just bring down stuff the way it is. So 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. So now I have 16 plus a negative 3. What's 16 plus a negative 3? Very quick. I was trying to figure out the rule. This is an addition of integers. Does anybody remember the rules for adding integers with different signs? Find the difference and keep the sign of the bigger number. So the difference between 16 and 3 is 13. The sign of the bigger number is a positive, because 16 is the bigger number, which means it's positive 13. I just wanted to bring that back, help you guys not forget about those rules. So 13, my friends, is the final answer. Did you see how it all got applied? Does anybody have any questions? Let's see if there's an example here. So, this is something you might come across, which is the famous brackets. Brackets, my friends, are no different than parentheses. They are the same thing. Either they gave it to you in bracket form or they just gave you really big parentheses. It's all the same thing. But most math books, most math tests will give you brackets. And believe it or not, brackets are helpful. The reason why books, textbooks, and tests give you brackets is because the moment you see them, you should say to yourself, oh man, there's a parentheses inside the bracket. So that's why they created brackets, just to kind of inform you. It's kind of to tell you, watch out, there is a parentheses inside of me, right? So let's look at it like this. Either you look at it as a bracket or you look at it as parentheses. No matter what, you have to go into it. We have to go into this parentheses, aka brackets, and forget about everything else that might be around it. So if we go into it, what do we see? Well, I see a 5 times negative 4 plus 3 plus 2. Well, if you notice, this is what I was talking about. There happens to be a parentheses inside of there, which means before you do anything else, you just warped into this big parentheses. And then inside of that parentheses, there happens to be a smaller parentheses. So you have to go straight into that. Yeah, we have to first go all the way inside so that we could work our way out. Which means you have to do this first. Inside parentheses or brackets, PEMDAS still applies pretty much. So we went into this big one and we're looking at it like that. We still have to apply PEMDAS, and what we realize is that P, which stands for parentheses, is rule number 1, which means I have to do the negative 4 plus 3. So negative 4 plus 3, what does it become? So again, you are all going to do this tedious step of laying out your work step by step. Negative 4 plus 3 became negative 1. So now we're still inside of this bracket, aka parentheses, or vice versa. So tell me, what must you do first? 5 times negative 1 plus 2. What do you do first? You do 5 times negative 1 first. You have to do this first. Because again, you just have to do it. That's what the order of operation tells us to do. 5 times negative 1, what does it become? Negative 5 plus 2. Negative 5 plus 2?
3.
Negative 3. Again, find the difference between the numbers and pick the sign of the bigger number. In this case, negative is the bigger number. And the difference is 3, so it's negative 3. So now I have 4, bracket or parentheses, same thing, negative 3. Which means multiplication. You have to multiply 4 times negative 3. Brackets and parentheses, they both are the same thing, which means if you ever have a number snugged up against a parenthesis, a number that's in parentheses, again, it means multiplication in the algebra world. So 4 times negative 3, what does that become? Negative 12. That, my friends, is brackets, which are just big parentheses. Same old function as a parentheses. It's just letting you know to watch out because there's some stuff to do inside the parentheses. Okay. What other tricks might they give us? This is a good one, kind of. Okay. So, what should we do? Do we see any parentheses? Do we see any exponents?
No.
Do we see any multiplication or division?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is a weird one, my friends. Keep note of this. There is a division. This is no different from saying, I don't know, 4 divided by 2, right? In terms of something divided by something else down below. So the thing is, what can you even divide, though? You don't know. What are you going to do? The last and first letter or number? Are you going to do 2 divided by 5 first? This is a weird thing that you got to watch out for. Technically speaking, even though it's not there, but put this in your memory bank, even though it's not there, a problem like this does have parentheses. It has it around those operations. It's because before you could even divide anything, you have to solve the top and you have to solve the bottom so that then you could divide. Why don't they just put parentheses? Don't ask why, Dougie Fresh. I'm just joking. No. In this specific case, why don't they put parentheses? It's just because it's one of those things where I don't know if you know this, but we'll get to that next week. A variable such as x, it has a 1 in front of it. That's going to come into play next week. Why don't they just put a 1? It's just one of those things in math in which they just hide things from us. To trip us up? Maybe. To trick us? To make our life complicated? Maybe. Or maybe it's just because it's one of those things that you have to learn, put in your brain, in your memory bank, and just have it there. So in this specific case, keep note that even though it's not there, you do want to do the 4 minus 2 and the 5 plus 3. So what is 4 minus 2? What's 5 plus 3? 2 divided by 8. It comes out as a decimal, or you just simplify it down to 1 over 4. Or whatever the decimal equivalency is. So just keep that as a note, my friends, because there are a couple fraction problems in here. Okay, that being said, I think that is everything, and I think we are good to start order of operations, unless anybody has a question. A question. You get 1. Okay.